Hi, everybody. Great to be with you. I'm Sage Cohen. I'm your host for the week in our amazing Writer's Digest Author Exchange Facebook community. And before I get started, I just want to thank you all for bringing yourselves so fully to our conversations and prompts this week. It's such a pleasure getting to know you, and it's been great learning with you and from you. And as we go, you can share comments in the sidebar, and I will be looking at them when I'm done kind of sharing what I have to share when it's conversation time. So the topic of our Facebook Live conversation today is top 10 ways to pivot from procrastination to productivity. I polled our community, and 50% of the folks who responded said that procrastination is their biggest challenge. So that seemed like the right topic for us to cover today. And my plan is that I'm going to speak for about 15 minutes, and then I'll take your questions at the end. And anyone who is watching this as a recording can also share questions at the bottom. And I will check back every so often and respond as I can to the comments in the feed then. So what I think is so tricky about procrastination is there's usually not a single reason that we're delaying getting our work done. I believe procrastination has a root system in us through which our entire Greek chorus of objectors gets played out. And when I asked you earlier throughout the week what procrastination is trying to protect you from, some of the responses that I heard from our community went like this. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. It's too scary to take this risk. I don't know if I'll survive failing. I don't know if I'll survive succeeding. What if I get rejected? What if it turns out that my writing totally sucks? What if my dream never happens? What if I really have to meet and feel the pain deep inside me? So, this is some scary stuff. And all of us have some version of these voices whispering in our ears. And of course we want to spare ourselves. Who wants to be in that kind of discomfort? But what I think is really important to remember is that procrastination is trying to keep you safe. That's its job. It doesn't want you to be vulnerable. It doesn't want you to get hurt. It doesn't want you to fail. It doesn't want you to make one single typo, because then you might open these floodgates. And so what I'm going to offer today are 10 practices that we can put into place alongside this desire to protect ourselves. And that gives us a way to move forward without triggering the panic button and shutting ourselves down entirely. So this is kind of like a parallel path of productivity that can kind of live alongside this instinct to procrastinate and delay and avoid all these things that are so scary in the writing life. So my first tip, and it might be the most important one to me, is to waste time well. So if you know that you're someone who's going to procrastinate, build it into your schedule. Simply make space for that part of you instead of resisting and struggling against it. For example, when I was writing my first book with Writer's Digest Books, Writing the Life Poetic, I knew that I was going to flounder around freaking out and telling myself I couldn't do it. So I made a schedule for, I had a 9-month window for writing the book. And in month number 1, all I scheduled was freak out and procrastination time. Because I knew from a lifelong writing practice, I knew from a life of listening to this I can't do it voice in my head, that was going to need some time to play itself out. And so I spent that month obsessively watching 6 Feet Under. I think I watched the whole series in that month. And then I was ready. I had sort of blasted out all of that anxious energy, and I was ready to settle down and get writing. So we all have our own versions of that. So I encourage you to just to schedule it in. Another really, really useful strategy for me in wasting time well is having a long list of kind of administrative busy work things that need doing. And then when I sit down to my desk, my practice is I have a 15-minute kind of procrastination window. I sit down, I blow off my nervous energy or my unsettled energy, and I handle things that are on that list. I do filing, I do email, I do scheduling, I do financial stuff. And those are things that still move my writing life forward, but they're not writing. And they give me a feeling of attending to what matters, but they also don't force me to settle into writing before I'm ready. And so that's another thing that you can play with, is how do I give myself kind of that bandwidth to squirm around in my seat? I do suggest that you set a timer. So whatever it is that works for you, if it's 15 minutes, the timer goes off, and then you know it's time to shift. And this is something I encourage you to play around with. Okay. So tip number 2 is to defuse fear. And I write about this a lot in a lot of different ways, but I think, again, fear, it just wants to keep us safe. It's trying to make sure we don't do anything that's more dangerous than we can survive. And in the writing life, the good news is that most of the things we do that feel like we're not going to survive, it's pretty likely that we will. So one of my favorite practices is to really listen to fear, to be really curious, to kind of lean in, but to not obey. So there's a movie scene that is my reference for this one. In the movie A Beautiful Mind, the famous mathematician who has schizophrenia is being visited by someone from the Nobel Prize who's come to tell him that he's won the prize. And they go on a walk together, and the man says to the mathematician, "So how have you overcome your schizophrenia? How have you gotten rid of the voices?" And he said, "I haven't. They're all right here. They're all walking alongside of us. I just have a practice of not engaging with those voices anymore. They're not in charge." So I kind of look at all of my sort of unfriendly fear voices, and that part of that Greek chorus that says you're not safe, you can't do it. I listen, and I say thank you for trying to protect me, and you're not in charge, but you're welcome to walk along with me. So that's one possibility. I think another really great possibility with fear is to focus on process instead of results, because the process is in your hands. You can control the process, even if you can't control the results. So if you attend to, I'm just doing my writing practice, and that's what I can feel good about. And whatever my fear is about what's on the other side of that part's out of my hands. But I'm just gonna kind of stay here in the present moment, taking the steps that I can take. And then my third suggestion and final suggestion about diffusing fear is to do what scares you because it scares you. If you're terrified to send out work for publication, send out 10 pieces of work. Just really lean into practicing and seeing that you can tolerate, survive, and thrive even through these things that scare you. And for me, it was when I first kind of got in front of it, for me, it was public speaking. It was sharing, and especially in the realm of sharing my own poetry, my most vulnerable work with other people. I really didn't know if I would pass out or die, or I didn't know what would happen. And so I did it once, and then I was still alive after, and I said, okay, well, that's a good data point. And so for another 20 years, I made myself get in front of audiences as much as I possibly could, because that was my way of being in relationship with fear. And it turns out that when you make choices like that, their fear has such incredible energy that then contributes to whatever you're working on. Showing up at an event and being terrified and doing it anyway, it has, oops, Diablo's here, has a tremendous amount of energy. Okay, so I've covered, the next tip I've talked about a little bit already this week, but I'm gonna share it again in case you all missed it. It's a really important one, is to work on, so this is tip number 3, work on one writing project at a time. So it's a lot less overwhelming to focus on moving one thing forward than moving 6 things forward. And when we're taking one thing to completion at a time, we can kind of see the trajectory. It's simpler, it's clearer. It has a feeling of momentum. We start, we finish. And that doesn't mean that all your other darlings don't get done. It just means that they get done in sequence. They get someone in our community shared that she lights a candle for all of her projects that are not active at the moment. Someone else was struggling with having 4 novels, working on her 5th novel now, having 4 novels finished, but she was feeling frustrated that she hadn't taken each one of those to completion, and what that meant to her was getting each of those published. So a lot of this is kind of up to the writer's discretion about what it means for you to complete a project. You know, for somebody in our community, just completing the novel would feel like completion and then focusing on the next one. But for somebody else, getting it out and published in the world is what completion is. So knowing what completion means to you and focusing on that project by project, it gives you a lot of momentum and clarity. I have shared this week, and I will share in the feed when I'm done talking, when the video's over, a link to what I call my One True Thing worksheet that can kind of help you figure out what's the one thing right now, and then how to kind of organize around making it happen. So I'll include a link below for that worksheet. You can just go grab it on my site for free. Tip number 4, know what's next. So this is part of the clarity that comes from having one project that you're working on. You want to make it as easy as possible to transition in and out of your writing sessions by preparing yourself for the next one. I call it leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, so that when you sit down next, you know exactly what the previous you had in mind for what needs to happen next. So that can be, you fold down a page and put an arrow, something super simple. You write a question for yourself. If you're working with an online document, leave yourself a bracketed note that says, start here and do this next, so that it's not a lot of effort to figure out where to jump back in. This also makes it easier to close out a writing session when there's something else you need to do and you feel like, okay, I know I can count on myself to pick back up here when I return. Tip number 5, set deadlines and then schedule them. Deadlines give you clarity so that if you have a goal, you know how you're moving toward it. They give you a feeling of accomplishment when you meet the deadlines. And sometimes we have real deadlines to clients or publishers or editors, but a lot of times in the creative life, we don't. And so what I'm proposing is, if you don't have an actual deadline, to make one up. So you might make a word count deadline, or deadlines around, draft 1 happens at this time and draft 2 happens at this time, or I will complete this number of chapters by this date, or this number of poems or stanzas, or whatever increments make sense for you and your work. And then once you have kind of drawn that line in the sand for yourself, schedule in how you're going to get it done. I really like to block off chunks of time in my calendar that are realistic based on, availability that I know I have. And then I can see that it's possible to meet the deadline. And then when I follow the schedule, it's even better. Okay, so tip number 6, be accountable. So if you don't have a client or editor or publisher expecting you to meet your deadline, promise somebody else that you will and report back to them. This adds a level of accountability that most of us don't have to ourselves. If I have promised my accountability group or my writing buddy or my NaNoWriMo community that I'm going to accomplish, a certain piece of work by a certain time, then it gives me more, it creates more pressure, pressure that works for me to get it done. And then make sure that you check in at the intervals that you promised and say that you did it. Or if you didn't do it, recommit to how you're going to make it happen next. Tip number 7, overwrite your inner editor. So we talked about the Greek chorus, all those voices that take headspace and can really interfere with our creative flow. So the practice that works best for me to kind of blaze a trail sort of right through right through the toxic clouds of all of that is free writing. Free writing is how I put on my blinders and just kind of move through that noise. And basically what free writing is putting your pen to the paper or your hands to the keyboard, setting a destination, whether it's 3 pages in your notebook or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and you go and you do not stop writing, you do not pause to think, you just kind of erase the words across the page, and it gets you kind of moving in a way that moves through the mental noise and into the deeper currents of your knowing. That's a practice that I use every time I get stuck. I go back to free writing. It's kind of like stretching for me, my version of writing yoga. So when you get in a stuck place, that can be a good way to kind of ease yourself in. This is another one we've talked about a little bit this week in the community. Tip number 8 is master the margins. So I know that a lot of us have a lot of resistance to using the little scraps of time that we have to write. It feels too small and too contained, too constrained. But I think it's actually those little slices of time are incredibly powerful. Many of us fantasize about quitting our day jobs and doing our creative work for 8 hours a day. And from what I have seen and heard from a great number of people in my writing community is that we don't realize how confronting and terrifying these big swaths of time can actually be. And the beauty of the margin, or that sliver of in-between time, is that the stakes are low and the pressure is low. Because, what can you really accomplish in 10 minutes anyway, right? But the thing is, this kind of little low stakes slice of time is a really juicy opportunity for great ideas and insights and snippets of writing to come through. And some of us have been talking about this in the community this week. I just want to invite you to explore it, to be equipped with some way to capture ideas for when you're waiting in line, when you're waiting to pick up your kid, when you're stuck in traffic, to just kind of stay awake to your writing life in those times and to see and to notice how those margins become essential connective tissue for your writing life. They can really be very powerful. Okay, tip number 9 is to measure progress. So we've talked about setting deadlines and being accountable to them, but having a system for actually seeing what you did can be hugely motivating, and it can sustain your momentum again kind of through those rough patches. So whether it's counting words or drafts or chapters or stanzas, having a simple way to track over time whether it's a notch on your belt or an Excel spreadsheet or a program. I like the program don'tbreakthechain.com. It's a super simple way of sort of seeing if you did what you said you were going to do every day or whatever the interval is that you choose. It kind of gives you a way to track yourself, to see how you're measuring up against what you said you wanted. And then tip number 10, and this one sounds kind of the goofiest, and I think it might be one of the most important of all, is to celebrate yourself, to celebrate each step you take. The writing life is scary, it's hard, it's confronting, it's lonely. We don't have a lot of the time people telling us what we need to do or noticing if we did it or patting us on the back or giving us a promotion. And we really need to attend to that ourselves. And the beauty of tracking progress is that you can celebrate progress. And I believe, and I have experienced this in my writing life, that what we appreciate appreciates. And so I have another little free gifty for you. Some of you have downloaded this already, but I'll provide a link as well after our conversation here to, it's called the Fierce Writing Life Mandala. So it's a mandala that and it's free, you can just go grab it. You color it in with each step you take toward your goal. So if you meet your NaNoWriMo daily goal, you color in a little part. If you sent something out for publication, you color in a little part. If you made that hard phone call, you color in a little part. You celebrate you honor each step that you take, each risk that you took. You say, I survived, I did that scary thing and I survived and I'm here to do it again. And this kind of practice helps us build a case for how courageous we are, how strong we are. We start to see that we can be up against all of these challenges that make us want to procrastinate, that make us want to avoid our writing practice, and we can handle it. We can survive all that we fear. So those are my 10 best steps, and my belief is that if we decide that we're willing to be even a little bit vulnerable, scared, or able to tolerate mistakes, then procrastination can relax. It doesn't need to stand between us anymore and between us and what we want, blocking the flow that happens naturally when we are excited about something and want something. We can trust in our deep resourcefulness to love writing beyond our own personal limitations. And we can trust that we can transform failure, mistakes, and hurt into exquisite writing and wisdom. Okay, so that's it for my spiel. It's time for questions. I'm gonna look at the feed and see what y'all have to say and see if we can have a little chat here. Hi, Sherry and Gabriel and Mark and Amy and Kristen. Oh man, the smoke. Hi, Linda. Okay, so do you all have questions? Do you have comments? Do you have tips to share of your own on any of these 10 things we covered? Celebrating, measuring progress, mastering the margins, overwriting your inner editor, being accountable, setting deadlines, knowing what's next, working on one writing project at a time, diffusing fear or wasting time well. Questions, comments, places you're stuck, things you'd like me to speak to? I see there's a little question happening here. So while we were speaking, while the question is taking shape, my cat Diablo joined us. He really likes to be a part of my video conversations. He is one of my productivity contributors and challenges. He likes to drape himself across my arms, and when I'm doing coaching calls, kind of wrap his tail around my neck and scare people. And So let's see. I don't see any questions happening in the feed, so I'll just give another moment and then I will say goodbye. And thank you. I really appreciate you all being here. Again, if you are watching the video when it is posted in our community, and if you have questions, you can just add them in the feed and I will respond to them. Also, I will provide the links to the Fierce Writing Life mandala and to the My One True Thing workshop. Okay, here is a question from Sherry. Part of my problem deals with chronic pain, which is hard to schedule around. Currently, I'm facing a third spinal fusion and have a manuscript ready to finalize, but can't focus. Oh, that's a biggie. Sherry, I know that I want to recommend to you all Jessica Abel, who is an incredible resource on making your creative life happen. She has incredible classes and communities around that. And I know that she has a thread going on chronic pain. I think when you're dealing with something that is really hard to plan for, like pain, kind of attending to knowing the windows that you do have. So I think you can still schedule. You can still know these are my blocks of time. And then from day to day, from hour to hour, you can check in with yourself and see if that is an option. I think there are chapters in life that we have an opportunity to be incredibly gentle with ourselves because there are other things happening in our bodies and our lives that are bigger than we can plan for. So another possibility, Sherry, around focus is choosing, finding a writing buddy or collaborator who can help you attend to what you want to move forward, someone to talk to about, okay, my next step with my manuscript is this. And in the next week, I have these 3 chunks of writing time, and I hope that I'll be able to use one of them. But to plan in a very spacious way for yourself and to honor and respect that there are things happening that are much bigger and more tender and challenging than just getting your writing done. And I hope that helps, Sherry. And if there's a kind of a layer deeper to the question, go ahead and ask it here and I'll try to respond. So Rupert, who is not Rupert, I'm Linda. Linda posing as Rupert or Rupert posing as Linda. Any tips on deadlines? I'm so useless at them. Well, there are kind of 2 ways to go about it. Oh, and thank you for your compliment on Diablo. Diablo is 18 and a half. So he's been my creative collaborator for a long time. Okay, so I guess my best tips on deadlines is, number 1, to promise them to someone else. You can promise it to me. I commit to doing whatever it is by whatever time. And we get to know what's realistic for us over time by practicing. So if you set a deadline that you're going to write a 50,000 word nonfiction book by next week, you're going to spend the week discovering how realistic that is and saying, oh, maybe actually 1,000 words in a week is more realistic for me, or 10,000 words in a week, or 1 page of handwriting. So you want to do this mix of setting a target, planning chunks of time for meeting the target, and then evaluating is this realistic for me in my life? And not shaming yourself or punishing yourself, but saying, actually, it turned out I only had 1 hour this week and I only can count on 1 hour every week. So what is more realistic? I have my friend and colleague Mantu Joshi wrote this incredible book that is helping so many people. And he wrote for 2 hours every Saturday for 2 years. He was the primary stay-at-home parent, and that's what he had, and that's what he made work. So I think it's a mix of experimentation, just putting a line in the sand, seeing how you do, and then refining from there. I hope that helps. Any other? Oh, there are some more questions. Okay, sorry, I'm scrolling down. Gentleness is the key. Yes. Gentleness is so important. We have all these mean voices in our head. And I think one of the biggest practices of the writing life is retraining those voices to be kind to us. We're doing our best. We're working so hard. And we need our kindness and gentleness so much. Any tips on, so Kristen, any tips on balancing working on one's author platform with getting the actual writing done? Yes. I tend to kind of schedule both in. So, for example, a way that I would kind of mix and match from day to day is I have designated time on my calendar. There was a period when I was, in the intensity of running my business and writing a book and building a platform or growing a platform. I would dedicate a smaller slice to the platform. So let's say I dedicated 10 hours a week to getting the writing done. I would maybe have a half hour every morning toward platform work, or 1 hour every couple days, but to have very specifically designated time for each. And if I'm getting onto social media, I'm doing it strategically. I'm saying I have 15 minutes, and the objective is to make meaningful contributions to my writing community, to be in support of my platform. So again, I think that's something you can play with to figure out what is the right time for each, what's the right mix for each. There are recommendations that you kind of chunk out writing in one writing sitting, 4 blog posts or 20 tweets, or, kind of doing a big chunk of platform building work so at one sitting. And for me, I've mentioned that I have I'm kind of scooty when I sit down to work. So I like to spend 15 minutes kind of doing that work because it settles me down to doing some of the other work. So those are some suggestions. I hope that helps. And Sherry, wonderful. And I recommend Jessica Abel for everybody. Oh, Rupert is my dog's name. Lovely. Okay, Mark. A lot of the procrastination I have is built on fear of staying truthful to personal setbacks or bad times that I want to fictionalize in order to deal with them. I'm doing better about being brave in that regard, but many times I'll put my writing time off to think about it deeper. I guess the best thing to do is capture them on a whim or in the writing moment. I think for me, Mark, my sense is I think writing is such a powerful alchemical tool. When we re-enter something painful, now Valentino's here. When we re-enter something that's very difficult or painful, it's an opportunity. Something different happens. We kind of complete it. We understand something new about it. And the sort of like willingness to hold space, to attend to observe, to inquire into these really painful places, somehow my experience is that it rewires me. It helps me complete things just by attending to them, just by observing them. And it takes some of that, I can't go in there, it's too hot, it's too scary, the sort of the practice of being curious and observing reduces my resistance. So I don't know if for you attending to, I'm re-entering these really difficult places with curiosity, with sort of an objectivity, because I'm going to investigate them for writing. I don't know if coming at it with that kind of attitude and with that kind of trust, that it's scary to approach it, but you know that you're going to come out better on the other side. That would be my recommendation. That's how I hold that kind of resistance and scary stuff. Let's see. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So Gabriel, you're saying you have the difficulty too of balancing the platform and the writing. Another thing in the mix of the platform and the writing, depending on what your platform is and what your writing is, there are ways to kind of intermingle them, to share chunks of your writing in ways that engage people and help them, to be really creative about sharing your gifts, sharing what you are excited about, in sharing things that you're discovering, that you're struggling with. Your platform building could involve discussing this topic, platform writing and creative writing. And so I guess my invitation is to make as much of yourself available to all that you are doing, so that it all feels like it's moving your writing life forward. Because if you're building your platform in a way that's, that's really authentic to you and aligned with what your offerings are, then that's going to contribute to your writing. It's going to give you energy. It's, instead of taking energy, it's going to mobilize you and again, be kind of that connective tissue to, wow, I really love my work. It's really important to me. So that's, I think, the ideal that we can all strive for, is that everything in our lives is a part of our writing lives, and everything that we're doing to move our work forward, whether it's, producing the work or planning to produce the work, or being in our, doing our practices of making the work happen and attending to whether it did, and all of that, if we kind of hold all of it sacred as essential to the work that we're doing, then our lives and our writing, I think, are richer and more satisfying. And then we're less in the struggle of, it's taking away from my creative writing or from, my true work. I believe that everything we're doing is contributing to our true work. And the more we attend to all the dimensions of what our writing life requires, the more momentum we have, the less resistance we have, and the more satisfied we are with everything that we produce. Oh, yay. I'm glad that was helpful, Mark. Any other questions before we go? Concerns? I just consider it's just such an honor and a privilege to be with you all. I love talking about what's possible in the writing life. I love finding ways to make our writing lives more possible and productive and delightful. And so that's what I am wishing for you all. And I so appreciate you spending this time on your Saturday with me. I have Diablo and Valentino chiming in the background. They say thank you. And again, if other things come up, put them in the feed and I will respond to them. And right now, after I sign off, I'll share the links that I promised. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Happy writing. Bye-bye.